In Coin City, life carried on peacefully as it always had. The streets were crowded with people, and the shops were already glowing with light from early morning. Jack was an ordinary worker. Every day, he woke up before sunrise and headed to the construction site where he had worked for many years. The job did not make him rich, but it was enough to pay the rent, support his family, and save a small amount for the future. Every morning before work, Jack, a Hispanic stickman, stopped by Sarah's bakery, run by a Caucasian stickwoman, to buy a loaf of bread and a cup of coffee. It was a routine that had lasted for years, and almost nothing had changed in his life.
But one autumn morning, Jack began to notice that something unusual was happening in Coin City.
When he walked into the bakery, Sarah greeted him with a smile and handed him the bill, as she always did.
Jack looked at the number on the receipt and was surprised to see that his breakfast cost one more coin than it had the previous week.
He assumed it was only a temporary change, so he paid without thinking much about it.
However, in the following days, Jack noticed prices rising everywhere throughout the city. Gas prices at fuel stations increased week after week, forcing many people to spend more on transportation. Food prices in supermarkets also climbed, making families think more careful about every shopping trip.
Electricity bills, water bills, and even rent became more expensive, making daily life increasingly difficult.
What worried Jack most was that his salary had remained almost unchanged during that entire period.
At the end of the month, while reviewing his expenses, he realized that his savings had shrunk considerably. He was working just as hard as before, yet it felt as if life was becoming more difficult every day. One afternoon after work, Jack decided to visit the Central Park to meet old Benjamin.
Benjamin was famous throughout Coin City for explaining complex problems in simple and understandable ways.
After listening to Jack's concerns, Benjamin smiled and began asking a question. He asked what would happen if the city had 100 loaves of bread and the people collectively owned 100 coins. Jack replied that each loaf would probably sell for about 1 coin, because supply and demand were balanced.
Benjamin nodded and then asked what would happen if the number of loaves stayed the same while the amount of money doubled.
This time, Jack thought longer before answering that people would compete for the limited number of loaves available. Benjamin smiled and explained that when more money chases the same amount of goods, prices rise. He said this was one of the simplest ways to understand inflation.
Inflation occurs when the prices of goods and services gradually increase over time, reducing the purchasing power of money.
In other words, the same amount of money buys fewer goods than it did before.
Benjamin then offered another example to help Jack understand the concept more clearly.
He asked Jack to imagine that everyone in Coin City wanted to buy a house at the same time. Meanwhile, the city could only build 1,000 new homes each year to meet demand. When tens of thousands of people compete for a limited number of homes, housing prices rise dramatically. People who already own homes feel wealthier because their properties become more valuable. However, first-time buyers face increasing difficulties as prices continue to climb.
Benjamin explained that this is an example of demand growing faster than supply, creating inflationary pressure.
But inflation can also occur when production costs rise throughout the economy.
If oil prices increase significantly, transportation costs also rise, forcing businesses to charge more for their products. When electricity costs, raw materials, and wages increase, manufacturers often have no choice but to raise prices.
Ultimately, consumers are the ones who pay those additional costs through higher prices.
By now, Jack was beginning to understand that prices do not rise for no reason. Behind every price increase lies a chain of causes connected throughout the economy. Even a small change can spread across the entire economic system and affect millions of people's lives.
Benjamin watched the people walking through the park and then offered a piece of advice that Jack would never forget.
He said that many people believe wealth means having a large amount of money in their bank account. But in reality, what matters is not how much money you have, but what that money can buy.
If 100 coins could buy 100 loaves of bread last year, but only 80 loaves this year,
then even though the amount of money remains the same, that person has effectively lost part of their purchasing power. On his way home, Jack spent a long time thinking about everything Benjamin had explained. He realized that inflation is like a slow-moving stream that continuously reshapes everything around it.
People may not notice its effects in a single day or even a single week.
But over many years, inflation can completely change the value of money and the lives of ordinary people. As the lights of Coin City began to glow against the evening sky, Jack looked at the coins remaining in his wallet.
He finally understood that the true value of money is not the numbers stamped onto a piece of metal. The true value of money lies in the goods and services it can purchase in the real world. And that was the day Jack learned his first lesson about inflation and how the economy influences every person's life.